Welcome to your final submodule in Cognitive Care and Aging. In this module, we have described differences between normal cognitive aging and age-related neurodegenerative diseases. We have examined the various types of diseases that produce dementia symptoms, and we have taken a deeper look at problem behaviors. We discussed how different problem behaviors arise from disease-specific degeneration patterns in several of the major diseases you are likely to see at work. Finally, we took a deep dive into Alzheimer's disease, the most common cause of dementia symptoms in the United States, and the disease you will see most frequently. In this, our final submodule, we will look back at the problem behaviors we discussed in our last submodule and describe behavioral methods of soothing, coping with, and working around those behaviors. Because we understand that coping with some of these problem behaviors can affect your health and well-being, we will apply behavioral practices to improve two aspects of your own well-being in particular: social interpersonal well-being and emotional well-being. Let's get started. First, let's start by thinking about the words we use to describe what we have been calling problem behaviors. We have been using that term because it is a commonly used term, but one key to emotional well-being is framing behaviors in the correct light. Problem behaviors come from problem people, but as you learned in our previous module, so-called problem behaviors are symptoms of a disease, just like pain and inflammation are symptoms of a broken leg. When we use words like problem, we start thinking of our patients as problems. And when we have a challenging interaction with a patient exhibiting a problem behavior, we tend to take the problem home with us. Problems require solutions, so we dwell on those behaviors because our brains are naturally primed to solve problems. Dwelling on challenging interactions can be taxing to our own emotional well-being. So how can we reframe these behaviors to reduce the likelihood of negative feelings about them? By calling them what they are: dementia-related behaviors. Let's think of an example of a dementia-related behavior that can affect our emotional well-being. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where a patient with dementia shouted at you? You probably kept your cool, but nobody likes to be shouted at. You may have wondered what you did wrong. You may have felt physical symptoms of stress. Later on, you may have felt emotionally drained, or even wondered why that patient was such an irrational and mean person. But what if you affirmed for yourself that the patient's behavior is actually normal for a patient with that disease, and that shouting is just a symptom? That keeping your cool de-escalates something that is perhaps even more unpleasant for the patient to experience? That the patient would have been mortified to have shouted in their earlier years, and that you are there to be the soothing voice for someone who cannot soothe themselves? Words yield emotional responses. When we reframe behaviors back to the disease that causes them, we carry less stress and strain home. Over time, reframing these behaviors can improve your emotional well-being. Now that we have reframed problem behaviors as dementia-related behaviors, let's look back on those behaviors most likely to challenge you in your work environment and affect your emotional and social well-being. The first set of behaviors we'll discuss are what we'll call agitation behaviors. These include physical or verbal aggression, emotional distress, pacing, restlessness, and other physical signs of distress. The second set of behaviors we'll discuss are sleep disturbances. While we wish all of our patients slept as well as this woman, in skilled nursing, memory care, and acute care settings in particular, sleep disturbances are common and can particularly affect those working evening shifts. Finally, the third set of behaviors we'll discuss are delusions, hallucinations, and time and place problems. Over the next few minutes, we'll describe what you are likely to see and some strategies for coping with those behaviors. Let's dig in now. The dementia-related behaviors most likely to affect your emotional well-being are probably agitation-related behaviors. These dementia-related behaviors can be hard to witness and be involved in, and can be particularly challenging to soothe. As we learned in our last submodule, these behaviors happen when degenerated emotional centers of the brain that are responsible for primal emotions like fear and anger are no longer inhibited by the degenerated frontal cortex. We all feel those emotions, but our intact frontal lobes control when and how we express them. If you care for these patients, you may experience shouting, and hitting. You may or may not be the person shouted at or struck, but even witnessing these exchanges can cause you to feel stress and anger yourself. Crying and distress. Patients, particularly in mid-stages of Alzheimer's disease, can realize that they are living with these diseases and feel depressed, out of control, embarrassed, and like they are, quote, going crazy. It's not uncommon for patients in these stages to feel upset, cry, and worry. Witnessing the sadness of others, especially when there is good reason for the sadness, and you can't take away the reason for the sadness, can seriously affect your emotional well-being. Agitation. Patients may not feel in control of their behavior and/or their emotional state. When that happens, patients can feel agitated, which may also make you feel agitated. Pacing and restlessness. These behaviors can come from agitation. They can also happen because motor systems in the brain are also degenerating. When you see a patient pacing and expressing restlessness, you may experience deep empathy and a need to soothe something that is extremely difficult to soothe. Fidgeting. Patients aware that they are experiencing memory loss may continuously check for important items like purses or bags. They may pack, unpack, and repack purses, continuously look for their wallets, and try to keep objects that look important because they are afraid of losing them. They may shred paper, they may repeatedly stand up and sit back down, and they may ask about the locations of important items repeatedly. They may physically fidget because motor symptoms are degenerating, similar to involuntary tremor. Not only can the repetitive behaviors and questions be emotionally taxing, watching people appear to be visibly anxious or harried can cause us to feel similarly. So how can we soothe patients exhibiting these behaviors? When a patient is angry, cool-off time can be an important strategy. If you find that you are also feeling angry, swapping out care duties with another staff member until you have a moment of calm can benefit you and the patient. Bouts of anger often pass quickly, and new faces can provide just enough distraction to redirect the patient. If the patient tends to be more emotionally labile at a specific time of day, such as late afternoon, anticipate the anger and provide a distraction, such as music. Music has been shown in studies to calm angry patients, especially when used preventatively. During a calm moment, ask the patient what music they like and play it or sing with them. When a patient is sad or distressed, soothing touch is a wonderful solution for both you and the patient. There is no better antidote to fear than a reassuring face and voice to remind them that they are not alone. As demonstrated in the image on your right, try placing a hand on their shoulder, holding their hands, linking arms for a slow walk, or even a gentle hug and slow rock, the very things that may also soothe your own distress at seeing a patient who is confused and suffering. Of course, try your best to read the emotional cues of the person you are attempting to soothe. Some agitated patients need a moment to calm down before soothing touch is effective. Have you ever been stressed or anxious and only found relief when you did something to distract yourself? Perhaps it was late at night. You were thinking about something stressful before bed, and you decided to read a book or watch TV to distract yourself. Redirecting mental energy away from things that stress you out can be a useful strategy to reduce stress. The same strategy applies to older people who are engaging in dementia-related behaviors. When persons living with dementias are experiencing agitation or irritability, redirecting that energy to other behaviors can be helpful. When the body is anxious or stressed or fearful, movement can be a great way to channel that energy into something beneficial. Taking a walk with a patient is a wonderful strategy, as is dancing, creating art with or without an activities group, or singing. When patients leave an environment in which they experience stress, mood can change. As an added bonus, facilitating these things might also alleviate stress for you, too. Sensory tools are another great strategy for relieving fidgeting and repetitive movements. When patients shred paper, pack and unpack bags, or engage in repetitive movements, sensory tools can be a useful tool. There are a variety of sensory tools facilities can invest in, from fidget blankets to activity walls to handheld objects. Allowing a patient engaging in repetitive movement to direct those movements to safe objects assures that they are less likely to misplace or damage something of personal value or to sustain an injury. Often, the disease is to blame for dementia-related behaviors. Sometimes, however, medications can cause dementia-related behaviors or make those behaviors worse. If you notice that dementia-related behaviors seem to be getting worse after a medication change, notify the healthcare providers you work with. Just as medication can make these behaviors worse, medications might also be used to make the behaviors better. If you notice any of the behavioral issues we have discussed, make sure that the other healthcare providers you work with are aware of them so that they can consider medications as a treatment. Some patients feel more comfortable with a routine. Others enjoy engaging in new activities. When patients are exhibiting dementia-related behaviors, you may not want to assume that what has always worked will keep on working. On occasion, you may want to help provide new outlets for redirecting energy. Preferences change as the disease progresses, so check in with your patients from time to time to see what they like and dislike. Finally, although we have discussed the benefits of environmental change, if it's possible to do so, consider including outdoor time, weather permitting. Exposure to nature can improve well-being for you and your patients. Dementia-related behaviors can take a toll on emotional health, but keeping a few simple rules in mind for redirecting these behaviors can reduce conflict and, of course, your stress. Everyone deserves to feel good at work and to have work be a fulfilling, meaningful part of life. Just remember, dementia-related behaviors are not personal. They reflect the disease, not the person who lives with the disease. People living with dementias can't, quote, just remember that their medications are helpful or realize that hitting is bad. Instead of correcting disorientation, try going with the flow. Instead of walking away from a person in distress, provide a warm, gentle touch. Instead of insisting and demanding that a person do what you ask, try again when they are more receptive. Instead of talking when a patient isn't complying, try singing. Instead of ignoring a patient in distress, lean in and involve them in something. Instead of arguing, try distracting. Instead of pacing with a patient, try walking or dancing. And instead of removing the patient from the unit, suggest a change in medication that might minimize these behaviors in the future. Cognitive care and aging impact all areas of well-being. And you have learned more about emotional well-being already. Let's switch gears and learn more about social and interpersonal well-being for our last few minutes. When you think about how you spend your day and who you interact with socially, you often think of your children, your partner, your close friends, and your family. But when you are at work, your social interactions with patients and coworkers are part of your social world. Stressful interactions with patients compromise social and interpersonal well-being and create stressful interactions with coworkers. So how can we improve your social and interpersonal well-being at work? And what is social and emotional well-being? Social interpersonal well-being is harder to define than physical or emotional well-being, but it is primarily concerned with the relationships and interactions you have with those around you. When considering your social well-being, remember that stress looks different for each person and that your stress level has a direct impact on those interactions and relationships. Remember to make time for meaningful social interactions outside of work. These interactions will vary by person, but understanding what type of interaction you need to meet your social needs is key to maintaining well-being. Take breaks when you can. There will be times when you are emotionally or mentally exhausted. Consider the type of situation that leaves you feeling that way and strategize ways to address your needs when those situations arise. Finally, there may be situations where your social interpersonal well-being necessitates the advice of a professional. Consider speaking with a mental health professional about your needs and concerns.